Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to our first virtual event. This will be a baking class. Hopefully it's interactive and you guys have your ingredients out and are following along with Carolyn. So we're going to have Q&A in the chat. There'll be some times with a little bit of downtime. So if you have any questions, shoot them over. I'll read them out to Carolyn during those moments. Otherwise, I just want to introduce the Bay Cities Bruins. We are a UCLA Alumni Association affiliated group in the South Bay region, which includes El Segundo all the way down to Palos Verdes and then west to the 405. But with that, I'm going to introduce Carolyn, and she's going to take this away. Thanks.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Carolyn. I'm the Vice President of the Bay Cities Bruins. So we're so happy to have you all here. As Karen said, in Q&A function, if you have any questions, as I kind of go along, Karen will be monitoring that. She'll be the one driving. She's also the secretary of our Bay Cities Bruins. So this is, I've taught people baking before, but this is like my first time doing virtual classes. So if there's anything that doesn't quite show up right, kind of just excuse us here. We're all kind of learning as everything else during this time, but we're very happy to be here. So like I said, my name's Carolyn. I've actually been baking since I was about in 6th grade. I think my love of pastries definitely came more first before my baking. And so moved to the US and my aunt had a side business baking cakes. And so starting in 6th grade, I started helping her baking. And by the time I got to, I think, middle school, high school, early freshman year or something like that, that was my Saturday, was baking cakes. So I would go to her house and she won't be there. She'll be at work and she have it all set up for me and she will tell me exactly the cakes I would bake. And her specialty was a mocha chiffon cake that I still bake to this day. So that's kind of how I got started with baking. I'm a home baker. I don't really sell any of my stuff or anything like that. I just really do enjoy it. Taken classes at Santa Monica at the Gourmandise School. I've taken pastry classes there, and then I spent about 5 days baking in Paris as well. And so that's kind of where I learned stuff, and I just really enjoy it. So just wanted to share a little bit. Home baking here, probably a lot of you are as well. And today we are going to do a devil's food cake that is really a go-to recipe of mine because it is super easy to make. I know Monica sent out the ingredients for all of you. We didn't send out the directions because it's actually really, really easy to make. And then we'll frost that with chocolate frosting. So just a reminder, Q&A, any questions that you may have. Later on, we'll have some time. There's a little bit of downtime, and I'm happy to answer any baking questions that you guys have as well. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go over the ingredients with each of you, and I'll share a little bit about what each of those ingredients do for this recipe, of course, and then we'll get going, and then I'll do just like a general overview of what this recipe is, which is actually just really 2 steps. So first off, what we have about a cup of sugar. It's about 200 grams is a cup of sugar. So I gave measurements both ways, both in weight and in just kind of the volume of it. I tend to actually like it in weights because it makes it your baking's a bit more consistent that way. So, but I did it for both because I know not everyone has a scale. So that's 200 grams or 1 cup of sugar. This is 1 1/3 of a cup of flour that we have. Just all-purpose flour. You don't need any special flour for this. When it comes to flour, though, try to get something that's unbleached versus bleach. Bleach doesn't really do anything for the flour. It's an extra processing that just makes it whiter. So you don't really need anything like that. We have about 1/2 cup or 1/4, 50 grams of cocoa powder, what we have here. And so with cocoa powder, what you'll find is that they actually come in 2 pints. So they are either Dutch process or alkalized is what they call it. All it does, and that's what I'm using today, is a Dutch process or alkalized. All that does basically is that it neutralizes the cocoa powder a little bit, so it's not so acidic. And then I'll let you know what the adjustment is in this recipe for it. If you're using like a Hershey or the Nestle cocoa powder, or anything that says 100% or just what is it called, like original or 100% cocoa powder, that's usually not alkalized. So I'll tell you what the adjustment is if you're using that. But here's the cocoa powder.
Really quick, Carolyn, what if someone is using semi-sweet chocolate?
For this particular recipe, you really do need to use, is it powder or is it chips? Because for this recipe, for it to be the devil's food chocolate cake, it needs to be a powder, not the chips. Thank you, Karen. So for this one, if you're using like chocolate chips or anything like that, it doesn't quite work with this recipe. It needs to be for cocoa powder. I think there's different recipes that uses it for the cake itself. For the frosting, we can definitely use chocolate chips. I can tell you how to adjust for that.
So you would recommend them just to make a white vanilla cake and then frost it with chocolate if they don't have the powder on hand?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's slightly different, you'll see. Then I have my, so with this one, we're using 2 leaveners, and just to let you know, I'm not advertising any of these brands at all. It's just that's what I buy. We're going to use baking powder and baking soda. And a common question is, what's the difference between the 2 of these? And there's not a huge difference. So baking soda is bicarbonate, and basically it needs an acid to react to it, so that way it will bubble up and let things rise. So this needs the acid. Baking powder basically also has the bicarb that's already on here, and it already has acid mixed in. So it basically reacts on its own and by itself. It's going to react with itself. The reason why it's not reacting right now in this can is that they also add cornstarch to this, and it helps it from reacting from each other. And it usually needs a liquid for it to react together. So we're going to use both, and I'll explain once we get to the liquids why we're going to use both. Salt, definitely in pretty much every recipe, you're going to see salt. It helps enhance the flavor. So you just need a little bit of it, probably about a pinch or so. In France, what they say is it's a French pinch, and they use 3 fingers to pinch it. So it's a pretty big pinch, but always do salt. With salt, try to use sea salt, something that's not iodized. But if you have iodized salt, it's not a problem. You can still use it in something that's already ground up. So not the flake sea salt, not for this recipe anyway. And just a little bit of vanilla, part of our recipe there. For the liquids, I already measured my oil here because I don't want to wash another thing. 2 eggs. We have coffee here that's at room temperature. And I'll show you later on what we're going to do with all of the liquids here. If you don't want it, coffee always enhances a chocolate flavor. So if you see recipes that it's a chocolate, but there's coffee, it helps enhance it. You won't taste the coffee at all. It just helps enhance that nice chocolate flavor. If you don't want coffee in your recipe, you can always just either add more milk, use milk or water to substitute, but that's more of a flavor enhancer. Now, I also have buttermilk, and this is actually homemade buttermilk. I don't make my own buttermilk because I don't buy buttermilk because they go bad really fast, and I never need so much of it. So all this is whole milk, and I did like a big splash of vinegar, stir it for a little bit, and then I let it sit, and it's going to start curdling. So I am using buttermilk for this recipe because I am using the Dutch process cocoa powder. And remember I said it neutralized the acids on this. So I need more acid. Actually, I'm going to add a little bit of acid, and that's why I'm using buttermilk. If you are using kind of just 100% cocoa powder that's not Dutch process, you can just use regular milk because there's already a bit of acid in the cocoa powder. So it's a little bit of an adjustment. If you use both or not, it's not a big deal at all. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. So any questions right now, Karen? Because I know I talk fast.
No, you're looking clean.
Okay, good. So main thing with this particular recipe, that's why I like it, and it's super easy, is that you combine the dry ingredients, you combine the wet ingredients, you combine them together, and then you bake it. And that's pretty much the instructions for this particular recipe, which I like it. It works really well. I'm going to do a 6-inch cake. This actually also is good for an 8-inch. It's just a thin 8-inch. So you can double this recipe. You can quadruple it, however way that you want. That's why I also added in the weight, so it's easier to multiply. And if you double the recipe, you can make 2 8-inch cakes, and you can layer it together. It's nice and easy. And this also works really well as cupcakes. For those that know me that has had my chocolate cupcakes, this is the recipe that I use all the time. And it makes about 6 to 9 cupcakes. So, all right. Any questions right now, Karen?
No, not so far.
All right, so let's get started. So first thing, I already washed my hands earlier. Just make sure you wash my hands. I always have, you can't see it, but I actually always have a kitchen towel that's slightly damp next to me. So that way when I'm baking, I can easily clean up my hands and I don't have to turn my back on you. First things first, turn your oven on for, it's 350. Mine's convection bake for about 325. My oven turns to run hot. So I actually have a temperature in my oven. So make sure that that's turned on. Make sure it gets to about 350. And then next thing I want to show you when you're baking is definitely read the recipe before you get started. Read it 2 or 3 times, see what the timing looks like, see what the order of ingredients and the steps are. If it's a good recipe, it should be listed by the order. The ingredients should be listed by the order of the of when you're going to use those ingredients. And that's kind of how you know, especially if you see recipes online. So I have my 6-inch pan. I'm just going to show you really quickly how I prep my my pans for this particular cake. It really differs depending on the cake that you make. For this one, basically it's parchment paper at the bottom, and I'm going to butter the end. So I have my parchment paper here. I'm just going to make my circle. And if you do if you don't have parchment paper, just butter and flour in your pan is fine. That's totally okay. So I drew my circle and cut inside the pencil line, so that way you don't get the pencil line at all. So cut inside that. My dog looking down here. And just cut inside it so that way it fits really nicely as well. And it's okay if it's not perfect circle, totally okay. I've seen other methods too that does like they fold it and stuff like that. They don't quite work for me as well, so I don't do it that way. So this is the part that I've learned to make. So I have this, then I'm gonna get a little bit of butter in my hands actually. Oh, this is nice and soft now. And all you need to do is put it in your hands right here and just put it there, and just actually the warmth of your hands, even if you have cold butter, is gonna help spread that butter really nicely. If you have a spray, the baking spray, that works fine too. I think I just like doing this by hand, and make sure it's completely covered the sides. Make sure that you get the edges as well, kind of those corners, and get a little bit at the bottom. You don't need the bottom if you're using parchment paper, because the parchment paper is going to help with it. So get that nice and buttered. And now when you get your parchment paper, it's pencil side up, and then you go down. So that way any pencil marks, just in case you didn't get to it, doesn't get into your cake, and just flatten it that way. Sorry, we were playing around with the angle of the camera so that way you can see it. Okay? And then that will just stick there. Okay? Then I'm just gonna set this aside, and we're gonna get started with the ingredients. I will wash my hands because that looks better. All right. Now let's get to the good stuff. So I pre-measured everything, but I'm also going to show you just really quickly, if you have a scale on how easy this is and how it's actually a lot less equipment that you're going to have to clean up later on. So we're going to start off with the dry ingredients. What you learn about me is I try to minimize how much stuff I use, so that way I don't have to clean up so much stuff. So here's my scale. It's just like a cheap one I got from Amazon. It's like, maybe it's like 20 bucks or something like that. So we start off with the sugar. So about 200 grams of sugar, if you guys are all following along. You can just tare it if you're using a scale, but this is already pre-measured. Add the 200 grams of sugar. So I'm gonna move it a little bit so you guys can see it with the other camera here. Is that better there?
That's good.
Good, okay. So that, okay. The 160 grams or about a cup and a third of flour, just put it all in there. There. I'm also very clean, so. And then the next thing what we'll do is the cocoa powder. So the cocoa powder, they tend to get clumpy in the container. So it's just better if you have a strainer of some sort to sift it in, so that way you kind of break them apart a little bit. If you don't have it, not a big deal, because we're going to be mixing it anyway. I just found that this is just much nicer if you do it that way. I have a small one and I have a larger one too. So use both. Just gonna strain that. Get the clumps out. It just makes it easier later on to mix this. Then we have our baking powder, which is about half a teaspoon. So it's a little bit less because there's a lot of acid actually in this because of the buttermilk. So it's about half a teaspoon. And this is kind of one of my other cheats, is that I look at what the teaspoons that I need, and I need a half a teaspoon and 2 teaspoons. So all I do is use 1.5 teaspoon, and I just kind of do the math in my head later on. So a half a teaspoon of baking powder, just put it all in there. 2 teaspoons of baking soda. This baking soda is gonna react with my buttermilk for it. So I'm gonna do, sorry, I'm using a half teaspoon so I don't have to do multiple ones. I'm just gonna count 4 here. It's actually quite a bit. This cake rises really nicely, which is also why I like it. And about half a teaspoon of salt. I usually actually don't even measure my salt, but just for the sake of this. And that's all of our dry ingredients. So I'm gonna get this whisk right here. Get out of my scale that I don't really need. And then you just wanna whisk this all together. Make sure that you kind of get everything.
So quick question, when you're measuring all the dry ingredients, those half teaspoons, are you making sure that it's scant, or is there, you kind of shake it off, or?
So what I do, thank you for asking that. So what I do is and even with flour, you kind of just want to do this, you just kind of want to fluff it up a little bit, get more than you need, and use the edge, and you get a better measure that way. So if you're measuring flour or anything like that, you just want to do it that way. Kind of fill it all the way up and just go through the edge that way. And that's what I did also with the baking soda. So this one right here right now, so it's nicely mixed up. Everything is mixed up together with the whisk and everything. You can see if you didn't sift the cocoa powder, it will just clump a little bit, so just kind of break them up if you have that. So we're gonna so all the dry ingredients are here. Now we're gonna set this aside and we're gonna mix up the wet ingredients. Start off with oil, which is a third of a cup of oil, about 2.5 ounces or so. And then we're gonna do, I usually do the eggs next. So one thing about eggs is you want to make sure working with room temperature eggs are best. If it's not room temperature, it's not a big deal with this recipe. Certain recipes, you do need them to be, if you're making meringue or whipping them up or anything like that, it is just better to have them room temperature. This one I've had out for about 1.5 hours, so it feels, pretty good here. So anytime you are working with eggs, you want to make sure you don't put it directly into your mixing bowl. You always just want to do a separate bowl for it, because you want to make sure that the egg is okay, there's no anything else on there, because if you put it right directly in here, then you kind of have to start over if there's any issues. When you're cracking eggs, never crack it on the edge of anything, because it's going to break the egg. and it may also end up with shells inside. So you always want to crack it on a flat surface for it, and just do a quick crack on it, and I just crack it open like this, and always, like I said, have a separate bowl for it. I have my trash bowl here too, and then pour it onto the bowl that you need, just to make sure that the egg that you're using is okay. I know it's a little picky, but that's definitely one. And so we're going to do 2 eggs for this particular recipe. That eggs okay. So I always do this. So I'm also very clean. Like this. Set aside. So, like I said earlier, I don't like have to do too many dishes, so I kind of use the same whisk. And I'm actually going to go ahead and add the vanilla as well. It's about 2 teaspoons. Vanilla is just for flavoring, so I don't really, to be honest, I don't really measure it. If you want to measure it, go for it. I just kind of do a big plonk of, try to use 100% pure vanilla extract versus imitation vanilla. They just kind of taste funky to me. So I usually just do just a little bit of vanilla there. Don't really taste the vanilla. Again, it enhances flavors in the cake. So if you don't have it, they tend to be pricey now, then don't. And I usually start with the oil, the eggs, and a little bit of vanilla. I'm gonna mix this up a little bit just to break up the eggs, just so it will make it easier to add in the rest of my my wet ingredients. So when you're mixing with a whisk or anything like that, you actually, I'm going to show it on the main camera here. You actually want it close to you as possible, kind of right in front of you. Hold with, I guess for me, it's my left hand. And when you hold a whisk or a spatula, actually hold it underhand. And I'm just gonna, I know I said that, but just so you can see it, what I'm doing here is I'm just breaking up that egg. And when you whisk, you don't really need to whisk that fast or anything. The main thing is don't lift the whisk. You don't have to go your whole arm or anything, and just do quick movements inside. And you can see that mixed up really nicely. The egg is really nice and mixed up. So do it that way. And now we're gonna add, this is 6 ounces or 3/4 cup buttermilk. You can add it in all at once. You can see the curdling there. And the coffee. So that gets added in. Okay. And just, again, underhand, and then go ahead and just, mix this just a little bit. You don't need full force or anything like that. Since the eggs are already incorporated nicely, then your liquid mixture is nice as well, and it's nicely mixed. So you can smell it. It smells delicious because I love coffee. Next up, we got our dry, we got our wet, and we actually just mix this together. Just pour it all over it. Okay. This batter is pretty liquidy. It's not a thick batter or anything. So I'm just gonna put this away so you don't topple over. You can use a wooden spoon or a spatula. Some recipes uses a hand mixer for this. I don't like doing that. I just like to mix this by hand. And all I do here, you can see, normally, like I said, you want this close to you and just do it this way. I'm just having it far away so that way you can see what how it looks when you're mixing this. So I do this very, very gently when I mix this, and just kind of mix them up like that, and just kind of break apart the big clumps of the dry ingredients there. They don't need to be perfect at all. You'll see that it's actually, you don't even need that smooth of a batter for this. The reason, because the flour has gluten in it, and so that gluten is getting activated, and they're forming like the bonds and everything else. That's why they always say never over mix your batter, because if you over work that gluten or that protein in your baking, what's going to happen is that you're going to end up with a very dense cake, or dense anything if you're using anything with flour. So you can see on here, it's pretty mixed. There's still kind of patches and stuff. That's totally okay. Even if you have streaks of stuff, it doesn't have to be super smooth. So now let's get our pan. So our prep pan, always make sure you do this make sure you prep your pan first before you bake, before you make your batter, because like I said, all of that stuff that we put in here, the leavening agents, all of that, they're actually already getting activated, and you don't want to wait too long before you bake this. So we're gonna do this. We're gonna pour this on. This actually makes, you're gonna have a little bit of extra batter for this particular one. I just wanted to do a 6-inch one. You don't want to fill it more than 2/3 of the way because this cake really rises nicely. So you just want to pour this on here. Same if you're doing cupcakes, you don't really want to do more than 2/3 of the way of your cupcake, or else it's just going to get too high. Oh, well, this one's not too bad. So that's about it. You don't need to clean it all up and stuff. So it's that. Oops. There. So cake's ready. Make sure your oven's at the right temperature. Also, why we want to make sure that we preheat our oven. Let me just put this in here. Yep, right temp. So I'm gonna, oh, this bakes, that one for a 6-inch, it bakes for about 30 minutes or so. Don't ever just go by the timer, the time that they give you on recipes. I'll show you later when we're about that time how to check it. If they say 30 minutes, set your timer for about 25 minutes and then check it then before you check it, just because you don't know how hot your oven is. There's a lot of different factors into play, so they're never really exact. When I first started baking, I used to run when the timer went off, and now it's like, okay, there's really no need for that. So for this one, I'm actually going to set it for 25 just to check it, and then we'll check, we'll check it at 25 minutes. If you're doing an 8-inch, which is a bit wider, so the surface area is, there's more surface area, it's probably gonna bake at about 20-25 minutes. It's less because there's more surface area. So I'm just gonna set my timer here for 25 minutes. And I'm gonna take a quick pause if there are any questions from anyone.
Yeah, we had a good one coming in from the chat. Can you explain the different types of flours?
Sure.
There's, I could list 3 or 4 different types and we never know what's the difference.
Yeah, so when it comes to flour, so there are different kinds. So let's start with the most common one and kind of tell you what the differences are. So the most common one that you see in most recipes, what they'll use is AP flour, which is all-purpose flour. So that one, can pretty much use it for most anything. You're kind of like, I'm starting with that one just because of density and stuff. So that's one you can use for cookies, cakes, everything else, AP flour. If it just says flour, it usually means it's AP flour. Some of the differences in the flour is in the protein or the gluten content of flour. So if I go lower gluten or protein content, you're looking at cake flour usually. I'm just going to go over the most common ones. And cake flour is actually all-purpose flour mixed in with a bit of cornstarch or other things in it. It's lighter. The cornstarch is a bit of a filler, so that way it has less gluten in it, but it still has that volume, I guess. So if you're making anything like a chiffon cake, anything that's soft and delicate like that, that's usually made with cake flour. It's a little bit lower protein content. Now, when you go above an AP, you're looking at bread flour is one. So bread flour has a lot more gluten in it, has a lot more protein in it, and you need that when you're making bread because you need all of those protein to make those strands, so you make it like a nice chewy bread. And the way you activate it and work with it is a little bit different. So bread flour. The difference between bread and AP flour, the protein content, isn't that much actually. AP flour is around 11 point something percent, and bread flour is about 12 point something percent protein. Whole wheat flour, which I actually like to bake with, whole wheat flour, that really there's a whole range of whole wheat flours that you can use. They also tend to be higher in protein and gluten content. They're also a lot less processed. I like mixing up, not with cakes, but when I make cookies or more baked goods like that, I actually like to use a mix of whole wheat and AP flour just because it has just a different flavor profile than the other flours. So I like to do that Cookies and stuff, I always usually make it with whole wheat flour. One other difference is that whole wheat flour tends to be, it might be a wrong word, but it's thirstier. It uses up a lot more liquid, so you know you kind of just have to adjust it, and you can always adjust recipes too depending on the flour that you're using. Another trick actually with cookies is that if you make it with half bread flour and half cake flour versus AP, it makes for a really nice texture for a cake, for a cookie, because you get the chewiness from the what's it called, the bread flour, but then you get the lightness of the cake flour. So it's really nice actually. So those are kind of the main ones to use. I'm a huge fan of whole wheat flour. I think I have about 3 or 4 different kinds right now that I use in the baking that I do.
Awesome. How long for cupcakes to cook?
Oh, good question. I would start off timing it at 15 minutes, depending on the size of it. Anywhere from 15 to 22 minutes, I would say, for cupcakes.
Awesome.
Depending on the size of your cupcake.
Someone asked if it's possible to make your own cake flour by using AP flour and cornstarch.
Probably. I just don't know the proportion, so I'm sure that's something that can be looked up, and you can probably do it. If a recipe calls for cake flour, I would say, yeah, absolutely. You can probably just look up what the proportions are, then it's easy enough to make that substitution. So that way it still comes out a bit lighter.
Great. Scott asks if when you're baking with glass versus baking with, a normal, if you had to subtract temperature or time to compensate for that.
You know what, that's a really good question. I'm actually not sure, to be honest with you, because I haven't really baked with glass. The only time I've baked with glass was with pies, and I can't remember, and it's been such a long time, so I'll have to get back to you on that one, because I'm not sure what the adjustment is with glass. As to what, Karen, you might know, is glass a better conductor of heat? It's not, right?
Well, it depends on what you're subbing it with, but glass tends to retain heat more. It doesn't have a higher heat temperature, like it doesn't get hotter, but it definitely retains heat more.
Yeah, so it may actually, you may need to decrease it then, since it retains heat, I would think, right?
Correct, yeah.
I think that's why they're sometimes in pies, yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Another one is, so someone is actually making it in an 8-inch cake pan, which will mean she'll take it out earlier than you. So if you could kind of just describe what she's looking for.
Sure. So I would say if you're doing it an 8-inch, it's a pretty, these circles have bigger, what's it called, area for it. Check it at about 20 minutes. So what you want to do is, when you're baking, especially anything that rises, like a cake, a cupcake, anything like that rises, do not open your oven door unless you absolutely have to check it at the end of your baking time. Because what happens is that you open your oven door, basically cold air is going to go in there, and it's going to affect the rise of that, whatever it is that you're making. So if you're doing cheesecakes and stuff, then that's not a problem, because those things don't really rise. So check it at the very end. So what we're looking for when we're baking cakes, cakes, cupcakes, bread, pound cake, anything like that rises. So when you take it out, just kind of shake a little bit, just a little bit of a nudge of your oven, not the oven, the my gosh, the where it's sitting, where your cake pan is sitting. If you see a jiggle on the cake in the middle of the way it bakes, it's the middle part, and the middle top is going to be the last one to bake. If you see a jiggle there, that means that batter is still wet, so that's not good yet. If you see if there's no jiggle at the very, very center top, and this cake does dome a little bit, if you don't see a jiggle there, what you want to do is you just barely touch the top of that, the very top middle. Touch it. Okay, if it springs back, it's done. But if it doesn't, and you touch it and there's an indentation of your hand, it means that batter is still a little bit wet, and put it in for another minute or so. I never do the toothpick test. I know they always say that, put a toothpick in, and if it's dry, then you're done if it comes out clean. What I found with that is that if you do that test, usually you've already over baked it. That's why it comes out clean, and you don't really want to over bake cake. So that's one test. So see it, kind of just give it a little shove or something, not too big, just enough to jiggle it and see if there's a jiggle. And if there's no jiggle, touch it. I know it's hot. It's not that hot. I think I've lost my nerves on my fingers, so I don't quite feel it. And if there's an indentation, then you need to put it in for another minute or so. But it's not a big deal if it's a little bit underdone there. I think with cakes, I'd rather have it be a little slightly under baked than over baked, than it's dry. Anything else?
Yeah. Have you ever used coconut oil as a substitute?
I have not, actually. I have not tried baking unless it specifically said it, not as a substitute. So I'm not quite sure how it works, but you can definitely give it a try. With this particular recipe, it's more for the moisture of the cake. So I don't think, it's still fat. So I don't think if you like the flavor of coconut oil, or if you just prefer it over, I use canola oil in this one, then it's okay. I think it's fine. I think it's fine to substitute it. I did make a chocolate olive oil cake once where I used a pretty big thing of olive oil, and it was delicious. The flavor was just really enhanced. Else?
Yeah. What school did you go to when you were in Paris?
Oh, it's actually, sorry, I'm not advertising them. It's just that this is the apron that was the most blue that I had. So it was actually called Cooking with Class. And I loved it. I went there for 5 days of just a series of baking classes that they have, and it's in the 18th. My French isn't very good, so it's in the 18th district in Montmartre, and they were great. And they had American brewed coffee, and it's like one of the few places that had American coffee. So I would get there a little bit early to get some coffee from them. So hopefully they're still around, but yeah, this is the apron that my classes.
Awesome. Yeah. So you mentioned that you took some cooking classes in LA. Any recommendations?
I am, hope this is okay. I'm a huge fan of the Gourmandise School in Santa Monica. So I've taken their pastry level 1 and level 2 classes. There it is owned by this absolutely lovely French lady, Clemence. And so they have really amazing classes, not just for baking, but also for cooking. So they do both sweet and savory, and they're located in the mall at the Santa Monica place on the 3rd floor. They have an amazing, when they first started out is when I started taking classes there. They weren't in that space yet, and they moved into this absolutely gorgeous kitchen. They also have a great market, kind of with ingredients like buy flour, chocolates, and stuff. And they're really good because they teach you the science, and they also they really explain what's going on, and that's the time to make mistakes is in classes, because then that way you can correct it and they can share it with you. And they kind of give you the freedom. I remember taking classes and to mess with their recipes a little bit if you want to change it up or add things. And if they have it in their pantry, they kind of just let you go use anything that's in their pantry that's not being used anywhere else. Anything else? Then we can get started with frosting, which is like the fun part.
Yeah, just one more, and we'll cut it off after this. Have you tried any of the masterclass type format of cooking or baking?
No, I haven't actually. I've been wanting to. As you guys, like, this is my first virtual. I actually haven't taken like an online. I've seen videos on YouTube when I've wanted to learn stuff, but I haven't actually taken a master class, which actually would be really cool to do, I think. So, but I do follow. I mean, on Instagram, I just follow lots. I mean, basically, my Instagram feed is just all food and pastries and chefs and stuff.
Awesome.
Cool. So we're gonna do a chocolate frosting for this particular one. And I know I shared a recipe with you guys, but I was sharing with everyone else. When it comes to frosting, I actually don't usually do measurements because I just kind of go by taste and stuff. So with this one, it may just get a little bit loud because of the mixer. I have a stand mixer. This is one of my absolute favorite things in the world. And honestly, if it wasn't so heavy, I'd probably save this if there was a fire and emergency. If you don't have a stand mixer, totally okay to do this with a hand mixer. Doing it by hand might be a little difficult, so you just won't be able to get it as creamy as you can. So if you're having just a hand mixer, that's okay. I'm gonna move this massive thing. And I always tell people this, I actually got this off Craigslist for about $140, I think. And I think its values at like, I don't know, 500 or something like that. So let me get my ingredients for our frosting. So for this particular one, we are going to use the basis butter, because butter is great. Sorry, I'm not used to having this go the other way. So there you go. We're going to start with butter. It is about 2 sticks of butter. And for this particular one, I'm making enough to frost our cake, but it's not, you can double it, you can add it. That's why my measurement for powdered sugar is like a range, because it really just depends on how sweet you like your frosting. So we're gonna start off with our, and it's already cut. This one, you do want it soft. Sorry, I know you can't quite see it here. Hold on, let me adjust. See, it's pretty soft. When you put when I put my hand, it basically makes an indentation. You kind of want it that soft. And you feel it that it's, you know, kind of at room temperature. So we're gonna put this all in here. It's about 2 sticks of butter, or is it 8 ounces of butter, something like that. Do that there. Okay. We're gonna go ahead and add the cocoa powder, and same thing as we did before, and I got that sifter dirty already, so it's okay. I'm going to use my bigger one. You want to sift this just because to get rid of the clumps that we have. And since this is chocolate, it's okay if I'm going to use the powdered sugar on here too. You see the clumps that I have here, you can just press that down. You don't want to waste. And this one, it doesn't matter if it's cocoa powder or, you know, Dutch process or alkalized, doesn't matter for this one, because there's really no reactions for this one. Let me pause real quick. So this recipe, I'm using a cocoa powder. This is going to make a really dark chocolate frosting. You can use, if you don't want to use it and if you find it's too dark for you, you can use chocolate chips and just basically melt chocolate chips, and that goes, and I'll show you when to add it in, and it will just make for a lighter frosting. So if you want to do more of a milk chocolate frosting and not something so dark, you know, get some chocolate chips or whatever. You can just put it in the microwave or a double boiler if you really want to get fancy. Put it in the microwave when you're melting chocolate. Melt it in like 15-second increments. Whip it up really fast and just mix it up really fast. Put it again for 15 seconds. Do it again. And when most of it is melted, then you can get that really nice chocolate. You want to do it very, very slowly because chocolate burns really fast, especially if you're dealing with, well, actually any chocolate. So just do it in like 15-second increments. Even though it looks like it's not melting, just do it and just mix it really nicely. Usually you get enough heat from the chocolate, it will melt on its own. So just do it very slowly. So cocoa powder or melted chocolate works for this recipe. That's why it's really nice. So I have this here. Since I'm using cocoa powder, actually, sorry, I'm gonna get my heavy cream, half and half, milk, just some sort of cream and fat, you know, you need a little bit of it here. Usually I add this at the very end, but this makes the cocoa powder, it's gonna make this really thick. So I'm just gonna add it just a little bit in the beginning, just a touch, just to get it going. And again, like I said, with frosting, I don't measure a whole lot just because I go by my taste and the texture that I want. So I'm gonna put this in, and this might just be a little awkward for me anyway, because I'm not used to it being this way. Put this in. Anything that you're doing, I'm gonna put this right there before I get it started. start off very, very slowly when you're doing mixtures because that chocolate might just go all over the place. So I'm going to start this slow, and then again, it's going to be loud because the other camera is going to pick up the sound really quickly. So I just want to make sure that you guys see it. Oops. Make sure you lift it up if you have one of these things. There you go. Start slow, and you'll see it will mix. So most of that is, you know, pretty much the cocoa powder is pretty much incorporated. Sorry, I have to do the reverse of everything here. So I'm going to take this out, and you'll see it's pretty much, sorry, this way, pretty much incorporated there. So what I'm going to do now is, you want to make sure you're going to end up keeping scraping all the time with this one. So just to make sure that everything is kind of blended together. Now, and then make sure that you're scraping at the bottom. Just a little hint, if any of you are considering a KitchenAid stand mixer, this particular brand, the one that has this kind of crane that lifts it up and stuff like that, has a bit of a blind spot, I guess, at the very bottom where it's not getting the bottom very well. So if you have this particular one, you just want to make sure that you're always stopping and kind of scraping the side of the bowl to make sure that everything's getting mixed in. So that one's nice and soft, the chocolate's incorporated, and then we're going to add our powdered sugar. This is about 2 cups that I measured out. I'm going to just do about half. I don't like things too sweet, especially when it comes to frosting. A lot of people, you will see recipes for frosting that has like 5 or 6 cups of sugar. You don't need that much sugar in it unless you like it that sweet. So I always start off with about a cup of sugar, and I know I'm not measuring it. I just know it's about half of this because I measured 2 cups of powdered sugar. Same with the cocoa powder. This tends to clump, so you want to make sure that you sift it into your buttercream to do it. And then I go by taste when it comes to this in terms of sweetness level. The powdered sugar does help with kind of the texture and consistency and of the stiffness of your frosting. But what I found is that I don't need 4 or 5 cups of sugar on this. And if I need it, if it's too soft, then I put it in the fridge for a little bit for it. So I'm going to eat this cake, just full disclosure. So just because it's taking a hard time mixing in there and I don't have a clean spoon right now. So I just use my hand when I do this, especially if I know I'm the one eating this or my family, they don't care. If I do this, then you can get all of those clumps. So I start with about a cup of that. Turn this around. How much time do we got left? All right. You're gonna, oops. Mix it again. Again, start slow or else you're gonna have like a nice big spray of powdered sugar. Sorry, everything's reversed right now. So I actually don't have to mix it that much because the butter was really nice and soft for it. So sorry, I'm just like, oh, there you go. And you'll see it's already getting really nice and creamy there, and it's getting mixed in. So again, I'm gonna scrape this, and then I'm gonna actually just start tasting it and seeing how I like it. And if I feel like, okay, I need a little bit more sugar, then I add a bit more sugar. If not, then I'll let you know what the next steps are. And our cake is just about ready to be checked here. So that went by fast. I talk a lot. So you see on here, it's really nice and soft. Like you can tell, like it's nice and creamy. So I just mix it up and stuff like that. You can use this for cupcake frosting, or if it's too rich, you can even do it as a filling. So have spoons ready. And just kind of go in there. Okay, like I said, I don't like things too sweet, so to me it's good. If it's too rich for you, then adjust accordingly. If it's not too chocolatey enough or it's too chocolatey, adjust according to what you like. You can also do a mix of cocoa powder and also do melted chocolate. I would put the melted chocolate at this point when it's really nice and soft, so that way it will mix better. So at this point, since I like it, what you're gonna do here is I'm gonna add a little bit of vanilla, which, oh, I do have that in my recipe. And I forgot the salt, sorry about that. Usually you add the salt at the with the powdered sugar, so it gets really nice and mixed in. I don't wanna add it now because then I may have just end up with certain areas that have salt in it since I forgot to mix that in, sorry about that. Add just a little bit of vanilla just for flavor. And then we're gonna do just like a nice big splash of heavy cream. I like doing heavy cream, milk, half and half. It lightens up because this is all butter. It helps lightens up the frosting. Back in. And then this alarm's gonna go off. So once you're ready with this, and you like the flavor, you like how sweet it is and everything else, you add the vanilla and the heavy cream at the very end. This one, put it on like medium and just let it basically whip itself a little bit. All right. So you'll see it get lighter and lighter in color because what it's doing is that it's incorporating air, and that's what's making it lighter and lighter in color and also in texture and kind of consistency of it. So really depends on kind of how you like it and everything. So this is good for me. I also sometimes will I will do this and then I'll whip it again and get it even lighter in color. And then it looks like I have two different kinds of frosting when actually it's the same one. It just makes a nice contrast sometimes when you're doing different, even though it's the same exact frosting for piping or anything like that. So actually I'm gonna lighten this up just a little bit more because I want some contrast with my cake. So I want this a little bit lighter. Alrighty. That is nice and whipped. I'll show it in a little bit so you can see how much lighter it's gotten just from that little, probably less than a minute thing there. want to make sure you clean as you go, so that way you don't have to clean as much later. You can kind of see it's gotten a lot lighter now from what it was if you're following along, especially if you're using cocoa powder. It's a lot lighter now. So here's my section. Okay. Let's whip this. So, it is a little bit soft because I don't put that much powdered sugar. The powdered sugar helps stiffens up your frosting. So actually what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna put this in the fridge for just a little bit while we get the rest of our cake set up for frosting. Yeah, it's really soft right now. That's okay. That's what the fridge is for. Anytime you're working on anything and it gets a little too soft, put it in the fridge for a little bit. This whips up really nicely afterwards too, so you can always just kind of keep whipping it too if you find that the texture is not quite what you like. So. I can't move my cameras to show you the cake right now, but you should also start smelling it. That's one of the keys when you're baking cakes. Make sure you're smelling it. You know, you're smelling what you're baking. A lot of baking stuff are set at 350 because certain reactions happen at 350, at 350, 365. And if you're doing that, then it also, those reactions called Maillard reactions with the sugar, it has a really nice smell to it. So definitely go by smell too. So this cake is actually, I'll show you, we're not obviously not gonna frost this. So I overfilled this a little bit actually. You can tell by the sides here, and you can see that, okay, to make a mistake. See when I move it, it jiggles quite a bit. That's what I mean by, okay, that thing is still wet. That's still not ready. So I am going to, actually, because I overfilled this cake a little bit, I'm just gonna put it on a thing right now since I don't want it getting, I don't want to have to clean up my oven right now. Do that. So you see that I filled it up just a little too much, and that's okay. Because again, that cake you saw it really rises. So, alrighty, I'll put that in probably for another 10 minutes, and then we'll check it. We'll check it again. It's just a matter of checking it. You can kind of see whether it's ready or not, just from the, you know, you kind of see the look of it. It's still wet and stuff, so it's good. All right. Should I pause for questions here, Karen, or should I keep going?
We could throw in a couple questions while we're waiting.
Mm-hmm.
So what recipes would you recommend for people who live alone, or, you know, obviously can't consume as much sweets as you'd like?
Yeah, so anything, so I live alone and I bake quite a bit. Anything that freezes is really good. So I always have a stash of cookies because with cookies, after you bake it, it's actually recommended that you chill it overnight. So what I just do is I just freeze my cookies, and I only bake what I want to eat. Biscuits, breads, any of those things that are, what's it called, that freezes are really good. And I know there's lots of recipes also that are for 1 or 2 persons that you can find now as well. So that's, so we can, I can get the frosting set up. Should I do that, or is there any more questions, Karen?
Sure. No. Go ahead and yeah.
All right. So I pre-baked the cake. Those cake fails that you see everywhere, number one reason I would say is because they frosted it when the cake is still warm. So you have to make sure that your cake is completely cooled off, especially the middle, before you frost the cake. When I bake cakes, I usually bake the cake the day before. And I hardly ever bake and frost on the same day. Cupcakes is a little bit easier because they cool a little bit better. So just kind of magic of television here. So I have a cake that's ready right now that I baked yesterday. It's the same exact recipe, except I didn't overfill it this time. You can see how it domes. Once the cake is out and ready, and you kind of do the test and everything else, when you touch it, take it out of the oven, let it sit this way, right side up for about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, just to let it cool off and finish baking, because it's actually still baking because it's hot inside. And then after about 10 to 15 minutes, you can get a cooling rack if you have it, and flip it. And let it cool the rest of the way that way, and just flip it on here. And then once it's cool enough that you can handle it, just get a sharp knife. It doesn't have to be completely cool at this time. Get a sharp knife, just kind of run your knife around it, and it comes right off. Okay, so I already did that. I just didn't want to do it again, or else I'm going to cut it for it. So I have a cake board that I'm going to use for this. If you don't have a cake board, totally okay. You can use a plate, something that's flat. Really, I just happen to have a cake board. So I usually do 2 layers of cake boards depending on how I'm decorating my cake. So I have my cake right here. You'll see that it domes a little bit. I was always taught to flip my cake, and I'll show you. I'm going to flip this cake, and I was always taught, see how nice that is? Nice and flat. There's no that concave, with other cakes. Chiffon cakes do that quite a bit actually, and you'll see it this way. So I was always taught to frost this side of the cake, and I've seen other people where they frost the other end of it. So really up to you. I like it because this is already a thing right there. The one thing though that you'll notice with this cake, because it domes, is that you kind of have a little bit, how you have that kind of space in between there. I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's a bit of space there. So you can either cut that off or not and just kind of fill it with frosting, however way that you want to do it. I don't like to cut it off because I like the height of it. So I'm just going to kind of leave it as is and just kind of fill it with frosting later. And it does come off this easily when you do the butter on the side and parchment paper here. Now just lift this off, and it's nice and moist. And it's a really nice cake. I reduced the sugar in this recipe, the original recipe, by about 50%. If you find that it's not sweet enough for you, you can go as high as 300 grams of sugar on this, by the way, which is the original recipe. I didn't like it that sweet. So there's a nice cake. I'm actually gonna do a filling, and I want to show you how to. If you do 2 8-inch layers, then you can just layer the 2. But if you do one like me, like here, and then to cut it, I'll show you really quickly how to cut it. Let me just grab it. Okay. So I need it closer to me, so I may just have to do it on the side here for it. So make sure it's a serrated, not the smooth one, the one that has edges to it. It's a serrated knife. This isn't even the best knife that I have, but that's okay. And all you want to do is just kind of measure, put your hand here, just make sure it's clean. Just kind of measure somewhat in the middle of that cake and just put it here. I have a turntable. If you don't have a turntable, you may just need to just kind of cut right through. So all I do when I do this is I apply a little bit of pressure in the cake, and I just go very, very smoothly through it until I cut across. And I'm basically just turning the cake little bit at a time, applying pressure to the knife, and I'm keeping my knife level. That's why I'm keeping my hand here. And just keep turning, applying a little bit of pressure every time. And the thing is, if it's not perfect, it's okay, because we're just gonna frost this anyway, so it's not really gonna show up. So you're just gonna keep turning, and you can kind of see where you are and stuff. And if you don't meet it, it's okay. I probably won't, because usually when I do this, I'm kind of doing this, or else, but you won't see me. So, and just kind of keep turning and applying pressure, turn and apply pressure, and you can kind of see I'm already kind of halfway. I've kind of cut through the cake already. A little bit, and just keep turning. And there you go. And now you're kind of through it. use my hands quite a bit here. There you go. Cut in half, and that's all you need to do. I've seen others do like dental floss, what's it called, thread and stuff like that. I found this works for me, so this is what I use. So I will put this away, and I just need to put this here. Okay. Now I'm going to grab my frosting. It's been chilling here. And actually what I'm going to do is I cut up some strawberries just for filling if you want. You can put any kind of filling really here in fruit. If you're doing any kind of fruit, make sure that they're, you want to dry them as much as possible, so that way you're kind of not adding to it. So I am actually going to, you want to do, when you want to do a filling in the middle, have my offset spatula for it. This is my favorite one. You can pipe it around. You just kind of want to do a border. Actually, let me just do it right. Where are my, sorry, I moved them out of the way. So now I can't, oh, there they are. And you just want to do a quick border before I put in just a thin layer of frosting for this. About a minute left in the cake, which, like I said, I overfilled, but that's okay. So I have a pastry bag right here, and I put just any tip that I want to use. I may use it later and stuff. So when you want to fill a pastry bag, fold it about halfway, what I'm doing right now. And what you do is, so it doesn't get dirty, you one hand, and then you get frosting on the other hand. I don't need that much, so, and then I'm just gonna put this in here. So things stay clean, and then you just flip it. This is a pretty big bag, probably bigger than what I need, so I'm just gonna push that frosting. I know I have a lot of little gadgets here, so just make it easier. There you go. Okay. Hold the frosting bag. You want to make sure, and at the very edge there, kind of clip it between your two fingers right here. Flip it and then twist it, so that way nothing gets comes off it. Okay. So all I actually want to do is I'm just going to make a, move this out of the way, a quick border here. Let me see how. You just want to do it at the edge, and it doesn't need to be a fancy. I just happen to have a tip on it. And you don't want it right at the edge, just a little bit before the edge there. And it just makes a border there, okay? Now, one another bowl, actually, sorry. Just to keep things clean. All right, I'm just gonna be a couple of stuff. And I'm going to put a little bit of frosting there. I just know the cake's not quite ready yet. That's why I'm not checking it, because it was pretty wet still. Just going to do a little bit, very, very thin layer in the middle, or more if you want. I just want to make sure I have enough frosting for the outside. That's all. Thin layer, just so that the strawberries will stick to something. Then I have, like I said, I have strawberries. This is just filling, so it doesn't need to be pretty or anything. Just keep it inside that border, so that way it doesn't ooze out of your cake and stuff. So do that. Just thought it might be a nice surprise. And again, you don't have to do this. You can do all chocolate frosting if you want. I just thought it might be nice to have this. So since I had the berries. Do another thin frosting with this, just to let it, oh, actually it may not stick. So, nope. Okay, we're just gonna do it this way. And then we're just gonna put this on top. You can do another layer of chocolate if you want, but you don't have to, because we're gonna put a frosting on it anyway. So just press that down a little bit. And we're gonna frost this cake. So hold on 1 second, let me just check this. Yep, still a little bit wet. Just like 2 more minutes, I think, okay? All right, frosting. I'm gonna try to do it here so you can see it a little bit better. So normally I would do a crumb coat on a cake, which is a very thin layer right before it. But with this particular frosting and cake, and a crumb coat is basically a very, very thin layer at the top and on the sides, and it just helps seal the frosting and the cake. And what you do is you put that thin layer, it doesn't need to be pretty or anything like that. If you've seen naked cakes, they kind of look like a naked cake. And then you put it in the fridge for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then you move on and let it set. But with this one, because of the kind of frosting it is, you don't necessarily need to do that. And you'll see why, because this has a more kind of rustic looking effect to it. So what I'm gonna do when I do this frosting is you put a big chunk of frosting on top, okay? Don't be shy with it because you can always take off the frosting. So always start off with more than you need, okay? Start in the middle. And again, I have a turntable here, so it makes it a little bit easier. I just flatten, and you just kind of, what you do is you want to push kind of to the side, kind of what I'm doing here. You're kind of starting in the middle and kind of making that pressure here. And like I said, this particular frosting is meant to not look so perfect. It's more kind of rustic looking. That's why I like it. And just kind of take it to the edge there. And it's okay if it's not perfectly, frosted or anything like that. You can, and I'll show you ways to not so much hide it, but make it seem like it's kind of part of the decoration. So there you go. So I tend to start at the top, and then what I do is to do the sides, which this is going to be a little tricky. Let's move this out of the way. I'm actually going to move this because we're done with it. I'm trying to see how to do this. Okay. I'm smelling my cake now, so I may need to, actually, let me just stop real quick and just take this out because I can smell it already. Then I can show you how it looks. Oh, no way. But I can smell it. Like I said, like I take it out and then I jiggle it, and then you can kind of see. So with this particular one, with this frosting offside spatula right here, get a little bit kind of on the back end of it. And then you're just going to, trying to see which way I should go here to show it to you. And just go on the side like that with that frosting. So I need a little bit more. And sometimes this is what I do as well, is that I get a spatula and I go on the side. Karen, is it better if I do it on the side or just go with the main camera? Sorry, I can't see it from where you guys are.
Side camera is better.
Huh?
The side camera is better.
Remember where I am?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sorry. Because I know I can't listen to the rest of you. So this is what I usually do, is I take a spatula with the frosting, put a little bit there, and then I just go on the side here. And I just kind of spread it at first and kind of spread a little bit on the top there. That was extra. Spread it again there. And again, it doesn't need to be perfect right now. I'm just trying to cover up the cake essentially. All right. Here we go. A little bit more. So I didn't put as much powdered sugar, so volume-wise, this doesn't make that much frosting. That's why I made a 6-inch cake, and also I made the filling, and usually I don't. So if you feels like you're a little short on frosting, you may be, because I didn't put that much powdered sugar, because that would have been another cup of powdered sugar on here. So that's probably why. I'm like, why am I short here? It's like, oh, because I didn't put that much. So Like I said, you can always adjust this. So I may not be able to pipe anything today, but that's okay. Move it around that way. And then the last of it, to exactly what I needed. There. Just to cover it up. Again, I'm not concerned with how it looks right now. I'm just like, I just want to cover up this cake, which is exactly what I need right now. And you know how I didn't cut the dome part? I just cover that up with frosting. If you want it perfect, then that's okay. All right. Now that I've covered it up, if you want to clean it up a little bit, what you want to do is, what I just did right now is I was scraping the edge of the spatula to make it as clean as possible. Doesn't have to be 100% clean. If you want it super clean, I usually go with a paper towel and just wipe it off, okay? And now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna even out the sides just a little bit. I just have it straight up and I'm just turning this, just applying a little bit of pressure on here, and you'll see that some are coming off. And if it's not perfect, I kind of like it like that. And I got a little bit off there. And then again, I wipe it clean. Okay. And then you'll see the edges are a little bit. And I just kind of wipe that, you know, kind of strain that out just a little bit. And it's a little bit harder to see it on video, but do it that way. Okay. Now, I'm okay with this. Then I just kind of clean up the edges as well. Or usually what I do is I just do I do a border or something to cover that up. So ways that you can make this really pretty. I'm a little bit short on frosting, or else I may be able to do a border here. The top, an easy one, if you have a turntable, and you guys have probably seen this design before, get one of these, or a spoon, offset spatula, something with a flat like this, or a spoon. Start at the edge, okay? And just turn it, apply some pressure, and slowly go outside. I don't know if you can actually see this pattern or not, but you'll see a spiral pattern. And just keep turning it. And you'll see that, you know, it makes a nice pattern, and it still hides kind of your imperfections and stuff. So I don't know if you guys can see that. I can move it up a little bit. And it made like a little nice pattern there. So there's that. So that's one idea. Another one that I've done on the sides, just to get a little bit of, you know, if you don't like it too plain and stuff. Another one that I've done is I will, sorry, I'm scared that I might topple this over. So all I do is, again, spatula, offset spatula or a spoon. You can go either up and down, and I'll bring this up again so you can see it very lightly. All I did was up and down. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. And it makes like a nice, almost like a bark-like pattern. Or you can also do it, if you want to angle it, you can, oops, that's a little too much. You can also do kind of sideways. And what it does is that it makes for a nice pattern without it, you know, that it hides imperfections a little bit. So I don't know if you can see that there. So you can do it that way. Other ways to decorate, sorry, I'm a little OCD, so I like things matching. So I'm just gonna do it this way, just to make it match. Just keep turning it. And if you want to try to do a, if you have tips, or if you're interested in piping and stuff, I know this is a little bit harder to see. I'm using a 1M. 1M is like, you can do so many things with it's called a 1M tip, or a 2D are the ones that you want to see. So with this one, I'm going to try to do it on this side right here. You can do either like a shell pattern, where you kind of go, you hold it like here, 45 degrees. You use kind of your left hand or fingers to help guide it. And you can just do this if you want. And it's kind of like little shells and stuff. Another design too is, sorry, I have to go the other way here, because I'm just used to it that way, is you can just kind of, I'm used to going the other way, sorry about that, then I'll show you guys how to do it. and it's basically a continuous loop there. Sorry, I'll show you. I know I'm not showing it to you guys. And what I did is it's basically just a continuous loop of things there. So kind of a pattern there. And now this cake is ready. So I'll show you. I'm sorry. Okay. This doesn't have a jiggle anymore. You can see the top. I move it. I want to burn myself. Okay. Oh, sorry. That pan is hot. There's no jiggle in the middle. It's not wet anymore. And if I touch it very carefully, you'll see it bounces back. There's a spring to it. And that's how you know it's done. So I'm actually going to take it off this counter that I have because wood counters are not good for heat. So I'm just going to leave it here, let it cool. What else can I do here? Cake-wise, you can do sprinkles if you want. I have some sprinkles here. You can do kind of, this is going to be a multi-personality cake. Sprinkles anywhere that you want if you want to do that. I also kind of just have little flowers and stuff like that. Kind of put it in the center. If you're going to do fruit on top of your cake, I would say put the fruit at the very end right before you serve it. Sometimes it kind of gets a little weird there. So I would just be careful with that at the very end before you serve it. So that is pretty much, let's do some sprinkles on one side. I've never quite gotten this right on how to put sprinkles at the edge of a cake because you kind of have to tilt your cake, which I'm scared to do right now. So kind of have to tilt it and put sprinkles this way, which is kind of awkward and stuff. So, but definitely do that. And that's pretty much, you can chill this cake. I would recommend chilling it for a little bit just to let the frosting set a little bit, but really serving it kind of at room temp or something, a little bit cooler because it's a butter frosting. So if you serve a buttercream frosting cold, it feels like buttery in your mouth, so it's not the greatest feeling. So it's better to serve it not completely straight out of the fridge. So that's pretty much what we have. We'll take any questions that anyone has if there's any more questions.
One came in. When you reduce the sugar in a recipe, do you need to make any other adjustments, or you just go ahead and the sugar?
I just went ahead and reduced it. For recipes like this, you can pretty much kind of play around with the sugar. The only time I would say don't reduce the sugar is if you're dealing with a meringue, because that's very, very particular on the proportions of the sugar to the egg whites. But usually with something like this, I always say follow a recipe the way you see it. And if you feel like it's too sweet or anything, then you can make your adjustments after. This one, the first time I made it, it was 300 grams of sugar. It's basically almost double the flour. And I just felt like it was too sweet. So I started reducing it to get to the point where, okay, that's fine. Before I've reduced it even more, and it was a little too acidic. There was a weird aftertaste. So I brought it back up to 200. Mm-hmm.
Great. And then if you could repeat the name of the Paris Academy again.
Sure, it is called Cookin' with Class. Cook ' N and then with class. So if you're heading out that way, it's a really great cooking school that they have. I've taken other classes at other schools there as well, but I like this one. I think it's no more than 6 people. I feel like 6 or 7 people in a class. It's a very small class and it's a small school.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Otherwise, I just have a bunch of thank yous. I think we all learned a lot, so that's a really nice note. But I think we could wrap this up.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining. I hope you guys learned, and those that were following along was able to follow along. You guys, I think in the emails, my email is there, so please feel free to reach out and let us know, give us feedback. I know they'll be sending out an email and stuff. And if you have any further questions, I'm happy to answer them. And also encourage all of you Bay Cities Bruins. Karen was sharing with you earlier. We have a couple of events coming up with Bay Cities Bruins. I just want to make sure that I get it right. So we have a virtual barbecue on July 1st for 4th of July. So I hope bring your favorite barbecue. We won't be doing any demo for that one. So bring your favorite barbecue from hopefully your local takeout place and join us for a virtual barbecue. And then we're also having a networking event in mid-July. Sorry, I'm like blanking out on the date there. And it's particularly targeted towards those that are new grads, or maybe you're looking to network. And we're going to focus and talk about elevator speeches, what it is, how do we go about it, and how do you learn kind of how to do that. If you're really great at that, please come and join us, and that way you can share your wisdom with the rest of us. And then anything else, please stay in touch with us through social media. Of course, we're on Facebook, Instagram. Are we on Twitter, Karen?
I'm not sure about that one.
Okay, Facebook and Instagram, and check out different events that we have. And if you have any ideas, I know everyone's going virtual right now. If you have any ideas or suggestions, anything that you'd like to see us programming-wise do, please send us an email. Let us know, either even through Facebook or Instagram. And yeah, reach out. And we're also always looking for board members. We are a big foodie group, so when we are able to get together, we always have the best foods. I bring dessert. You can check out my Instagram page and see what the kind of goodies that we have in our at our meetings. So thank you again all so much. Karen, did I miss anything?
It's July 14th is the mixer, but otherwise, thanks so much for attending, and we'll see you at the next event.
Hope to see you. Bye. Thank you.